Вітаю, шановні колеги. У нас залишається буквально 1 хвилиночка до початку. Як зазвичай перед початком ми перевіряємо звук, перевіряємо картинку, вітаємося у чаті. Будь ласка, скористайтеся чатом, позначте якимось чином, що все добре чутно, все добре видно. І за можливості надрукуйте, звідки ви до нас приєднуєтеся, щоб ми відчули ось таку нашу онлайн-єдність. До нас приєднався Харків, Бровари приєдналися. Супер, бачу, що добре мене чутно, добре видно. У нас Суми, Біла Церква, Черкаси, Одеса моя люба приєднується, Київ приєднується, Полтава, Волинь, знову Черкаси, Львів приєднується, знову Одеса, знову Київ. Вітання з Києва, вітання з Харкова, з Новоград-Волинського, з Київської області, з міста Вишневе, знову з Харкова та з Кривого Рогу, Київ, Дніпропетровщина. Вітаю усіх, вітаю усіх учасників. У нас 15 година за київським часом. Вас вітає Macmillan Education, представництво в Україні. Для тих, хто зі мною не знайомий, мене звати Інна Нестоїтер. Я працюю методистом, консультантом у представництві Macmillan Education в Україні. Знаходжусь зараз у передмісті Києва. Технічний такий момент на початку. Всім учасникам, будь ласка, не нехтуйте своєю безпекою. Якщо раптом почнеться повітряна тривога, будь ласка, будьте у безпечному місці. Ця конференція записується і обов'язково кожен учасник, незважаючи на те, чи ви були весь час, чи змушені були покинути і перейти в укриття, ви обов'язково отримуєте запис цієї конференції. На початку кілька таких highlights перед тим, як ми перейдемо до нашого першого спікера, який вже до нас приєднався, але на початку кілька таких моментів, які, напевно, будуть цікавими багатьом, а може і усім учасникам нашої сьогоднішньої зустрічі. По-перше, сьогодні понеділок, і ми найближчі 3 дні будемо проводити Back to School Conference. Сьогодні у нас день перший, і у нас 2 сесії, 2 спікера. Це Чеслав Кінський і Джейн Кадволодер. У другий день ми будемо мати також 2 сесії, і вони будуть цікавими тим вчителям, які працюють у середній та старшій школі. І ці сесії будуть проводити пані Кароліна Катарович і Яцек Лагун. Всі спікери відомі українським вчителям, адже вони є і авторами, і тічер-трейнерами, і вчителями, і Чеслав і Яцек, вони були кілька разів в Україні і зустрічалися з вчителями наживо, здається, як у попередньому житті. Джейн і Кароліна зустрічалися з вчителями українськими на онлайн-заходах, які ми організовували. І на 3-й день у нас буде такий весь день New School Year Highlights. Ми зібрали запитання від вчителів, які працюють в різних класах, в різних регіонах, і вирішили дати відповіді на найактуальніші питання, які хвилюють сьогодні наших українських вчителів англійської мови. Також хочу заспокоїти усіх учасників. Ви отримуєте за кожен день сертифікат учасника із серійним номером. І перевіряйте, будь ласка, свою папку спам, бо дуже часто сертифікат може потрапляти саме туди. Кілька таких дуже швидких моментів про New School Year Highlights. Чим керується кожен вчитель англійської мови на початку навчального року? По-перше, це державний стандарт, і у нас їх 3. У нас є державний стандарт, навіть 4, я б сказала. У нас є державний стандарт початкової освіти, у нас є новий державний стандарт нової української школи для 5-9 класів, і він чинний для 5 класів. У нас є державний стандарт для 5-9 класів за попередніми програмами, за попередні роки, він чинний для 6-9 класах, і державний стандарт у старшій школі, який відповідно для 10-11 класів. Крім того, кожен вчитель керується у своїй роботі навчальною програмою, саме навчальною, а не освітньою. Ну і, безумовно, кожному вчителю потрібні підручники, за якими вона планує свою роботу і проводить уроки. Ми також керуємося методичними рекомендаціями від Міністерства освіти і науки України, керуємося критеріями оцінювання. Ми складаємо календарно-тематичне планування, і воно є основою нашого поурочного планування. І на початок навчального року є дуже важлива річ – це Back to School Kit, вчительський кіт, це діагностувальні роботи і матеріали для повторення. Якщо ми будемо говорити про підручники, то всі наші підручники мають гриф Міністерства освіти і науки, вони схвалені до використання у школах України, вони є в переліку рекомендованої літератури на 22-23 навчальний рік. Всі наші підручники, ви бачите, у нас спочатку, ще з 2020 року, коли розпочалася пандемія, гасло нашого видавництва «Ready for any scenario». Дійсно, ми допомагаємо вчителям бути готовими до будь-якого сценарію розвитку подій в освіті, чи це офлайн навчання, чи це онлайн навчання, чи це змішане навчання дистанційне, адже всі наші підручники, вони мають цифрові коди, за якими і вчителі, і учні мають електронні інтерактивні підручники, вчителі мають інструменти для проведення онлайн-уроку, це Class Presentation Tools, у вчителів є ресурсні центри з готовими додатковими завданнями, у вчителів є генератори тестів, у учнів є онлайн робочі зошити, які перевіряються автоматично, і вчитель отримує готові оцінені результати їхніх робіт, або онлайн practice, це залежить від того, який саме підручник обирає вчитель або школа, і учні також мають свої ресурсні центри з аудіо, з відео і з додатковими завданнями. Що стосується навчальних програм, цього року найактуальніше питання – це питання навчальних програм на основі модельних для 5 класів. І тут у мене є для вчителів чудова новина. Для тих, хто працює в 5 класах за підручниками видавництва Макміллана, це передусім підручники All Clear і Gateway, хоча є багато вчителів, які продовжують працювати з курсом початкової школи, який є середній рівні, це Academy Stars English World, ось до них розроблені навчальні програми на основі модельних, і їх можна отримати, зателефонувавши або написавши нам у представництво. Це тільки для тих, хто працює саме за нашими підручниками. До 5 класів оновлено календарно-тематичне планування, і воно є у відкритому доступі на нашому сайті. І знову таки нагадаю, є оновлені 22-го року грифи Міністерства освіти і науки України, і підручники включені до переліку рекомендованої літератури. Коли я говорила, що ми готові до будь-якого сценарію і що ми намагаємося допомогти вчителям та учням бути готовими до будь-якого сценарію, я мала на увазі, що наші підручники всі електронні знаходяться на платформі, яка має таку назву, яка говорить сама за себе – Macmillan Education Everywhere. Вона містить для вчителя інтерактивний підручник, інтерактивний робочий зошит, онлайн-тренажер або онлайн-зошит, які мають особливість таку, там автоматично перевіряється виконання завдань, у вчителя є електронний журнал класу і є можливість надавати миттєвий зворотній зв'язок своїм учням. Також на цій платформі у вчителів і учнів є аудіо, є відео, які можна завантажувати і можна переглядати і в режимі онлайн. Звичайно, є тести і генератор тестів, і є готові додаткові завдання для учнів. Ось така у нас готовність до будь-якого сценарію. Для тих, хто раніше не працював з нашими підручниками або забув, як це робиться, на нашому каналі YouTube є відео tutorials, як реєструвати код, як реєструвати учнів, як приєднуватися до онлайн-класу і таке інше. Все це можна передивитися на нашому каналі Macmillan Ukraine в YouTube. Календарно-тематичне планування, як я вже говорила, воно є на нашому сайті у відкритому доступі. Його знайти досить просто. Треба знайти у каталозі підручник, до якого вам потрібне календарно-тематичне планування, і натиснути на вкладку «Календарно-тематичне планування». Ви бачите, що ці календарні плани, вони у форматі Word. Це означає, що ви можете їх редагувати за своєї потреби. Ще трошечки вашої уваги. У методичних рекомендаціях цьогорічних говориться про те, що для всіх класів, ну, крім перших, звичайно, рекомендовано виявити рівень опанування учнями навчального матеріалу за попередній навчальний рік. І за результатами, які ви отримуєте, запровадити коригуюче навчання. Як і минулого року, у нас на нашому сайті до кожного нашого підручника, до кожного рівня нашого підручника є діагностичні тести, які ми рекомендуємо проводити на початку навчального року. Вони є до кожного підручника, вони перевіряються автоматично. Учень одразу отримує свій результат, і вчитель в електронному журналі також отримує результати по своїх групах. Ось, наприклад, так, підручник Academy Stars, починаючи з 2-го рівня. Якщо ви плануєте працювати, наприклад, з рівнем 2 Academy Stars, то ось він, цей діагностичний тест. Якщо ви плануєте працювати за All Clear 5-й клас, то ось цей 5-й клас Diagnostic Test, він якраз для ваших учнів. Ось так я зробила невеличкий скріншот, виглядає тест зсередини, він перевіряє не тільки лексику і граматику, він також перевіряє уміння в читанні та аудіюванні, учень обирає відповіді, і де ви бачите відлік часу, тобто це не триває безкінечно. Учень отримує приблизно ось такий результат, скільки правильних відповідей, скільки відсотків правильних відповідей, яке повідомлення, а це вчитель бачить у себе в кабінеті на нашому сайті Macmillan Ukraine, може завантажити тести, ключі до тестів, і ви бачите дуже корисна така методичка, як працювати з результатами діагностичних тестів, бо не тільки провести ось цю діагностику, не тільки перевірити, який рівень опанування навчального матеріалу за попередній навчальний рік, а що й далі з цим робити. Ось тут є якраз покрокові поради. Все це завантажується з нашого сайту для зареєстрованих користувачів. Крім того, до наших підручників є матеріали для ось цього коригувального навчання, це catch-up material. Вони є у ресурсних центрах вчителів до підручників, вони є і безпосередньо у підручниках, бо кожен з них має starter unit, він створений авторами таким чином, щоб забезпечити ось це саме повторення і коригування всього того, що було у попередньому класі або у попередньому періоду навчання. Наприклад, якщо ми говоримо про 5-й клас, то ось цей стартер-юніт до підручників, він буде охоплювати матеріал початкової школи. Ось так виглядають сторінки. Передостання моя новина – це у нас є новинка для вчителів, які працюють у початковій школі. На сьогодні це болюче і актуальне питання водночас. Багато учнів залишилися навчатися за кордоном, які навчаються у вас, вони залишилися за кордоном. Яким чином вони можуть навчатися за підручниками? Є можливість придбати просто код, і це має назву Digital Pupils Pack. Активувавши код, у учня є підручник, робочий зошит, онлайн-тренажер, аудіо і відео. Тобто не потрібно якимось чином доставляти паперову версію, все це можна зробити онлайн. Таким чином ваші учні, які знаходяться за кордоном і не мають можливості отримати паперові версії підручника, мають таку ось нагоду все ж таки навчатися разом з тими учнями, які паперові підручники все ж таки змогли придбати. Наостанок я закликаю вас приєднуватися до нашої спільноти на Фейсбуці, в Інстаграмі, до нашого каналу YouTube і до нашої нової спільноти у Телеграмі. У нас є Телеграм-канал, ви можете зробити скріншот і потім, за потреби, відсканувавши ці QR-коди, приєднатися до спільноти. На цьому я з величезним задоволенням запрошую нашого першого спікера, нашого доброго друга. Я переходжу на англійську мову. Hi, Czeslaw. I am really glad to see you and to hear you. And I'm really happy to have you as the first speaker for our today's conference, day one. For colleagues who are not familiar with you, just in one sentence, Czeslaw is a teacher. Also, he is an English language teacher. Also, he is a Cambridge examiner. He is particularly interested in teaching teenagers. He is also the co-author of some teaching materials for Macmillan. And he is a teacher trainer who conducted dozens and dozens of workshops for English language teachers. So, Czeslaw, the floor is yours. Welcome and thank you for making this happen.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I hope you can hear me. Can you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. All right. So I'm going to share the screen, just a few technicalities, 30 seconds, and we'll be starting off shortly. Can you see the screen? Yep. Okay, great. So, so thank you very much for this invitation. It feels like really, really special to be coming back, to teaching, and today I'm going to talk to you about, as you could read in the conference abstract, about the role of formative assessment strategies in teaching, speaking, and writing. And, I know that it's an online event, and, you can all see me. I can't see you, but I hope, you're all listening. And looking at the chat box, I have realized that you have already completed my first assignment. That was going to take me 30 seconds. I was going to ask you about, to type in the place that you come from. And I'm scrolling through the list, and judging by my knowledge of the geography of Ukraine, this is really all over the country, which is great. So that was assignment number one. And now I'd like you to, to become familiar with the housekeeping rules. For today, there aren't too many, but I would like you to use the chat box, right? So anytime you have questions, please ask, or I will read them and maybe we'll respond at the end. I will try to respond to them, straight away. And if you have any questions, ask. If I have any questions, please answer, okay? So from time to time, let me know that you're really there and that you're really listening, because I know it's being recorded and some of you will be watching this later. And last but not least, please react to my jokes. We're teachers, we have our own specific jokes, but we still like people to react to them. So anytime, you hear a joke, a teacher's joke, you can perhaps react by typing, the emoji, the smiley emoji in the chat box, right? In case, you happen not to get my jokes because, I'm a teacher and no one gets teacher's jokes, I'm going to show you this, right? Just as a reminder, so we can actually check that, any moment you see this, you can type your joke, your emoji, or type in a smiley in the chat box. All right, does that seem okay? Great. All right, so my first assignment is, yeah, it's working, colorful emoji. Yeah, it feels so great. Okay, let's get started. So I would like you to think about formative assessment, and everything that you've heard about this so far. And I would like you to just quickly check, well, together with each other, how much we already know. So if you think about the term formative assessment, and you had to rate your own knowledge, where 0 is like, I know nothing about formative assessment, and that's why I'm here. And 5 is like, I know everything about formative assessment, and I'm just here, to spend some time with the teachers. Can you please type in, like, your own awareness of, the strategies? Yeah, 3 to 4, 2 to 3, great. Great. All right, thank you. Okay, so I would like to start with a little bit of a personal story, right? A story of a great teacher. Like, the man you can see here is my brother, my favorite brother. I come from a family of 8. I'm the last one, the spoiled one. And this is my favorite brother who taught me pretty much everything. The pretty thing about my brother, Leszek, is that, he's not even a teacher. But as an older brother, he was everything you can hope for, everything you can imagine that's perfect in an older brother. So he taught me to ride a bike, to tell the time. He told me how to talk to girls, how not to talk to girls as well. He told me how to talk to my mother when I was a naughty teenager. And one of the things I remember was when he taught me to ride a bike. Unfortunately, the image of me riding a bike isn't available because that was not the time when people took pictures of everything to put them on Facebook. Joke. Okay. But I think we all remember, we can all tell the time when we learned to ride a bike. And the times, you tried and you tried hard and then you fell off the bike and somebody gave you this fantastic advice, keep your balance. Thank you. So there I was, like, falling off my bike, and my brother, like, being ready to tell me, what I did right, what I did wrong. And all that time he supported me. After some time, I learned to ride in a straight line. So I got to the end of the yard. I had to get off my bike, turn the bike around and get back. And he told me, this is pretty cool, but you have to learn to ride the bike with turning left and right. After some time, I learned to ride the bike, and I could only turn left. So he told me how to practice turning right. And all this time, he was very supportive, and, he was very encouraging. And I know that I cried a lot. I fell off my bike a lot. I wanted to give it up, and I wanted, like, never to ride a bike again. But he still told me, you can do that. I believe in you. And why am I talking about this to a group of teachers? It's because I think that our job is closer to teaching a person how to ride the bike than it is to transferring knowledge. Because with all respect to the other teachers, geography teachers and history teachers, they're all important, but I think that English teachers are special. I hope you agree with me. And it's because teaching a language is really teaching a skill. And riding a bike is a skill. So we don't teach, just knowledge, we teach a skill. Otherwise, we would be teaching something about English. Like, this is the English education in like 1960s, 1970s in Poland. That was lessons about English, right? Not lessons of English. So much as we love the present perfect, we know that knowing the theory of the present perfect is not the key to successful communication. By the way, that was a joke. So, it's that's why I believe that our profession, what we do, our daily activity is closer to riding a bike. So what? Well, so I think it's only natural for our students to become discouraged. And I think we all teach, like, all kinds of, teenagers, and we know how often they become discouraged. I think to say that, they're mentally strong and they persevere and they never worry, would be just taking it too far. because they do get discouraged. And you can see that even if they don't tell you, because some of them are boys and, 14, 15-year-old boys, 12-year-old boys, have to be tough. So they pretend, but still they get discouraged. And you can see that when they get like test results, when they try to say something, but they can't say it. And then, they want to give up and so on, right? So the idea is that because learning a new skill, riding a bike, cooking, speaking English, is always connected with a lot of emotions going on. It's also going to be connected with a lot of discouragement. And I don't know whether you're familiar with the name Carol Dweck. That's a top world psychologist who says, after analyzing like the habits of successful people, she realized that the most successful people in life are not the ones who are the brightest at school, right? This is quite surprising because we always see those little geniuses at the age of 6 or 7, and we think that, yeah, they're going to, to go big in life. Well, the thing is that it's not the most talented people, it's not the most, brilliant children that succeed in life, but it's the most motivated children, right? And as Carol Dweck says, motivation is the most important factor in determining whether you succeed in the long run. So we're not thinking about like short-term school success, we're thinking about long-term success. And she said, what I mean by motivation is not the desire to achieve, but the love of learning, the love of challenge, and the ability to thrive on obstacles. And these are the greatest gifts we can give our students. And that's why today I would like to talk about how to maintain motivation. Because I think all of us have got this memory of learning something, then becoming frustrated, becoming, disappointed with ourselves. And yet there was someone who told us to persevere. There was someone who told us to continue. And this is your next task for, for today. I would like you to quickly type into the chat box whether you have ever met a teacher who was not a qualified teacher, a family member, maybe an uncle, maybe an aunt, maybe a primary school teacher, and what this person taught you. So what I'd like you to type in the chat box is something like brother, so who this person was, brother / riding a bike, okay? Mother, how to make a proper dinner. Can you please type it in and show me, yeah? You see how beautiful this is, right? So I'm going to give you like, a quick, 30, a husband riding and riding a bike. That's beautiful. And you can see a lot of this, happening here. And I think we all have like those personal stories. And I think you could read this somewhere in the comments that someone mentioned a dance teacher who showed us how to be confident. I think this is beautiful. I think this is probably, the most important thing that we can pass on to our students while we teach them English. Because as I said before, I really believe that English teachers are, kind of superior to all other teachers because we do so much. We teach the language, but we also teach, attitudes. We also teach, how to behave, etc. And that's why, because motivation is the most important factor in determining whether you succeed in the long run, today I would like you to, to become more familiar with formative assessment. And to those of you who are not quite familiar, just a quick, comparison and contrast of formative assessment and the traditional, at least in Polish schools, and I think it's the same in Ukraine. We've got summative assessments, so grades based on a scale from 1 to 6 or A to F. So in formative assessment, it happens during the learning process, as opposed to summative assessment, which happens at the end of a unit, the end of a section, the end of a chapter, the end of the school year, some kind of exam, right? Because formative assessment happens, in between, it allows teachers and students to pivot their strategies. So we don't have to wait until the end to find out that you did something wrong. And then, you kind of wasted a year. But, you can quickly, make some corrections, to your teaching, to pretty much everything, right? And in contrast, summative assessment is about providing a final evaluation of, concept knowledge. And Formative assessment, shows you like which areas, you need to improve, and it gives opportunities for students to implement their feedback and then kind of get back to you. By contrast, summative assessment, is like high stakes because, you always have like this one chance to take the test, one chance to pass this or to take this exam. And it involves like a ranking of students. So, we very often, come across this idea of, 90% is better than 70% and all that. And that very often students who score, like in official tests, students who score lower are sometimes more communicative and actually like, much better users of English than the ones who get better grades. I hope, this has been your experience as well. So the next part of my session is going to be devoted to how to use formative assessment strategies in speaking. And the next part is about formative assessment strategies in writing. And the last part is like a little bonus section where I will show once again that I believe in the superiority of English teachers who do so much more than just teach, a language. All right. So part one, formative assessment in speaking. I think my most recent experience with teaching beginners was teaching Polish to a group of Ukrainian teenagers. And that was great because, I have almost forgotten what it was like to teach beginners. And I know that when I present like speaking activities, I have to show my students like clearly what kind of speaking I want them to do. So I provide them with a model, okay? So it's not just now you've got like, 10 minutes and talk to each other, because very often our students are beginners or, their level of English is not sufficient to maintain like a super natural conversation about everything, and the teacher can just rest and relax for a while. So I would say that the first thing to do is provide them with a model. And I think we sometimes, teach those braver students who are able to actually tell us what they think. And I've got this person, her name is Ola, and anytime she doesn't understand something, she will like confront me directly and say, can you please tell us specifically what you want us to do? Okay, that's like borderline rude, but I kind of welcome those comments because I think Ola is the voice of many other students who are too afraid to ask a question. So we provide a model. Then I think we have to provide the resources. So for example, if you've got like a dialogue about buying a cinema ticket, you have to provide the resources connected with how to buy a ticket, how to change a reservation, etc. Then, the next thing would be to discuss like illicit ideas. So this is like the moment where we give our students some kind of flexibility, right? Maybe to think about the less standard, the less common language that happens in restaurants. I wasn't given this idea. I wasn't given this chance when I was learning German. So I only learned German through dialogues. And those dialogues were fixed. So up until today, when somebody offers me a beer, I can't say that I want the beer, but I have to say that I would prefer a Coke. Just because, this is something I learned in my German dialogue and I wasn't taught that kind of flexibility, right? Truth is, I don't like Coke. I'd rather have a beer, but I don't know how to say that, right? So we try and elicit the ideas. Now we give our students like, enough time to practice. And then we kind of create opportunities for feedback and self-reflection. And this is the moment where mobile phones come in handy because the students can record themselves and listen to themselves as well as each other. And this provides this space for self-reflection, because before we actually ask our students to like submit the recording to us, we can ask them to work on the recording alone or with a partner, and then perhaps give them a chance to have some kind of self-reflection. Maybe they will already notice something that they should correct next time they do it. And then they have to repeat the procedure. And now this seems like, a bit twisted because, it sounds like asking someone to repeat the same dialogue again. But don't worry, I'll show you how this could work and why this will work. But I hope that this model seems reasonable to all of you, that especially with lower levels, we have to structure the speaking, right? We have to provide a model, resources, give our students like enough time to practice. Because I think those earliest moments are perhaps like the most important, because it's always more difficult to unteach something, like once you teach it, than to teach it right for the first time. And I hope that this is an observation that you agree with. Do you? You quickly type in yes, no, true, false. Yeah, are you still there? Okay, hope so. Great. So let's carry on. And now this is like the approach that I often see in the All Clear series. That this is like exactly like in keeping with the formative assessment strategies. So remember that the first thing we mentioned when we talked about how to teach speaking is to provide our students with a model. Like what you're looking at here is obviously a model from the first level, okay? So as you can see, the dialogue is quite basic, but even though it's basic, it gives you some kind of possibility to change it. You see that some parts of the text are in blue. Okay, so this is what I would do with my students first. And I did the same with those Polish dialogues in my Polish course book last holiday, that there was like a structured dialogue with some space for flexibility. And I think this flexibility obviously grows together with our students like linguistic development. So you have much more flexibility when you have more linguistic resources. If you don't have the language resources, well, then you can't really allow yourself to have more flexibility. Okay, so we provide them with a model, and the model is clear. It gives you like all the language that you need at this level to have a successful conversation, at this point. Obviously, as I said before, the older the students are, the more time they spend speaking English, the less structured it becomes. But at the beginning, it's very structured, okay? And then, to me, this kind of dialogue is like learning to write. I know it's speaking, but the essence of this dialogue is like learning to write, or actually to speak, for that matter. Do you remember? I don't know whether you do that in Ukrainian schools, but we do that in Polish kindergartens and primary education. We teach our students to write by asking them to follow, like to trace a certain pattern, like you can see in that chat box. Is this the method used in Ukraine as well? And so we see that we teach the same method, and you can see it like in English course books and everywhere else. And then you don't really want independence when you can't write or speak. So you learn to speak, you learn to write by imitating, right? When I was a beginner guitarist, I learned, to play other people's songs, right? Not my own songs, because I didn't know any songs. I didn't know chords. I didn't know anything. So we follow that. And this is, again, what you do in an English class, okay? So you give your students this model because this is the reflection of reality. And I think it's simple, but it's also successful because, very often, like those simple strategies, work best. Okay, we said that, when you look at this dialogue, you have to like fish out the most important resources, like the most important bits, because not everything in this dialogue is equally important in terms of, how often you can use that in the future, right? So obviously this is like, intention language, going to, invitation language, some basic questions, present simple questions, going to questions, right? And then, it would be beautiful if our students could see that on their own. And we sometimes hope that we don't have to, show them that, but, it's not really true. They have to, they have to see it and they have to be shown, like, what they have to pay attention to. Because, when you're 12, when you're 14, when you're 15, you may be 17 and you still like don't see those words in bold until the teacher, tells you that. And, this is a strange experience because, as a rational person, every teacher will know that when something is in bold, it's probably more important. True for grown-up rational English teachers, right? But not so much true for teenagers. That's why you have to, teach them that. I remember, that at the end of every unit, you have like this word list. And in the word list, you have those list of, tested words. But still, I see that when I tell my students that the test is going to contain only the words in bold, and then I dictate those words, it seems like I am disclosing some kind of James Bond secrets, and everyone is writing this down. Still amazes me, right? I don't know why they do it, but you have to show that, as a teacher, the course book gives you this possibility, but, the course book, won't come alive unless you make it alive. So, you've got the tool, now you have to use it, properly. And then there comes this, space for practice. So you have been given a model, you have been given the resources, and now you've got some kind of, flexibility, as I said. So you don't repeat the same dialogue, but for example, we have like two choices. One is about a bowling party, one is about a picnic in the park. You pick whichever one you want. You've got, the things you have to ask about, the times, the places, and then, you recycle that model from the previous exercises, the first and second stage that were provide the model, provide resources. So you look at the model and change the words in blue. And now, again, this seems so basic, but if I had had that opportunity when I was learning German, today I could order a beer, right? Without this opportunity, I can only drink Coke, and I don't want to drink Coke. So that's why I avoid speaking German, okay? So then comes, this, little, as I said, flexibility moment, and then your students can practice their dialogues. And I think this is like this magic, like this beauty of online education, that in some respects, in some aspects, it gives you more possibilities and more flexibility to do certain things as a teacher. For example, when I was teaching online at university, we did a lot more recordings, and these were first of all like peer reviewed. So the students had to listen to someone else's recording and assess it. And then, they had to get back to me and we discussed them together. And I think regardless of whether you do like traditional classroom teaching or whether you do online teaching, the possibilities are still the same. So your students have a chance to record that and then maybe even write a transcript. The transcript of that would take like 2 or 3 minutes. I still do transcripts with my students who are higher levels sometimes. And then this makes sense, if you have some time for feedback, self-reflection, and repetition. And now repetition, would that make sense? Asking someone to repeat the same task, that would be strange, right? To repeat the same dialogue at the same restaurant, and again, choosing the Coke. But with a little twist, this will make sense, because otherwise, everything that has happened so far will make very little sense. I'd like you to look at this model again, just for a while. You see, provide the model, provide resources, elicit ideas, make students practice. The first 4 steps, if you stop here, well, you will probably never know whether what you did was successful or not. So I wouldn't like to say that it's going to be useless, but it's going to use, well, it's going to lose a lot of its potential. That's why I think this next step is so important. And it's not just feedback, because I think we all have this memory of giving our students like very detailed feedback. We saw them like nodding their heads. Everything is fine. And then all they wanted to hear is like whether they got an A or a B, an A+ or B+ or whatever, okay? And this is not the point. Feedback only makes sense if it's fed forward. So it's like, you give them the feedback, but then they have to get back to you. And the best thing to do that would be to repeat the task somehow. Now, this seems, intuitively correct, that repeating, a task might make sense, but, there's actually research evidence, and the research has been going on for at least 2 decades. So it's quite reliable. It shows that giving students feedback and asking them to repeat the task can produce real improvements in the quality of their production. Okay, so it's not just, repeat this and hopefully you will become like, more fluent, we'll see. No, there's like solid scientific research, right? And I think this is perhaps like the best thing we can do, like base our teaching on like solid research results. So I teach teenagers, but I also do research into language learning. And that's why I think we have to connect those two worlds to do the things that really work. But there's another problem that, asking students to drill the same task over and over again puts them on something like autopilot mode. Autopilot mode, you're flying a plane and, you don't really have to control anything because the autopilot will do it for you. And it prevents you in a way from refining and developing your skills. So it's like, getting back to my bicycle example, if I only practice like riding in a straight line, I would probably ride in a straight line until the end of my biking career, right? And this won't make sense. So you have to work on refining the details, right? So with most students, there's always a possibility for improvement. Maybe pronunciation, maybe intonation. Maybe they forget the be auxiliaries, right? Maybe they say I going to, right? That won't affect, the meaning, the communication, but it does affect the accuracy. So we have to, help our students, like, refine these skills. And I would say that except for very few students, there's often something that you can improve, okay? And so here comes the moment where life is less, the English language learning is less fun. I don't know whether you had those books in Ukraine. When I was a teenager, we had this series of books in Poland called English is Fun. I've never seen a book which was called Chemistry is Fun, Geography is Fun, anything else is fun. It's a joke, by the way. But English is fun. Yeah, so except for being like, qualified language teachers, we have to be entertainers, psychologists, and all that. Can we do that? Of course we can. But this is a moment, this stage 5 and stage 6 of our model is actually sometimes connected with temporary loss of enjoyment. I would like you to think about the skill that you told me about, before, whether it was cooking, riding a bike, whether it was, driving a car, working on a new type of computer, doing arithmetics and so on, right? When your teacher points out, like, or together with the teacher, you find out some mistakes, in summative assessment, you will get a grade. So here is your 3+ or your B+. Now go home and study for the next test. But here we focus on this deliberate practice. So we tell the students, like, very openly, you see, you've done so much and it's all very successful. Now pay attention to this one bit, this one detail. So next time you ask questions, focus on, are you going to? Not you're going to, but are you going to? When you ask a question in the present simple, focus on, what time does it start? Not what time it starts. Because, lots of Polish students think that English questions are just statements with rising intonation. Not true. So that's why you have to really focus on that part. So it's not like the easy peasy, funny English class, because English is fun moment, but it's a concentrated, like a very focused moment of attention, okay? I'm not saying it has to last like a whole 45-minute lesson, but there has to be a moment where our students, like, have this chance, to actually focus and reflect on what they need to improve. Just as a cyclist, just as a cook, a chef, a driver would focus on what they need to do in order to get their game right. All right. Same thing happened like to me when I became a driver. I had to learn like, parallel parking and parking in general. I couldn't do that. And my first instructor just told me, wrong, try again. Okay, I didn't know why it was wrong, how it was wrong. But I think as English teachers, we have to work on that in order to create that feedback loop. So what you feed your students back is kind of, fed forward, and, you get like the second take. And the second take doesn't have to be like an identical dialogue. So remember that you can always have this other possibility, the words in blue, they give you like enough flexibility. And I think if you agree with this approach, like this is the right approach, to teach speaking, you will find that this is like a standard, that this is a feature of the All Clear series. That you've got those structured speaking tests, like which are like not tests, sorry, assignments, which are kind of in keeping with the formative assessment guidelines. All right, and I think that it works. It works, and I've been like trying these strategies. It's simple, but it's very effective. All right, and now before we move on to our second part, which is formative assessment in writing, I would like you to think about your students' attitude to writing. What happens when you give them a writing assignment? Do they welcome every assignment with joy? When you give them, an email to write, do they always ask you for another one because the first one was so much fun? Probably not. And, this is a reason that kind of puts a lot of teachers off doing writing. And I've seen a lot of that when I observed my teacher trainees teaching practice. Like, I went to the primary schools to observe their teaching, and I noticed that they weren't doing much writing. And I said, why? And they said, because my students don't like that. And I said, so what? I mean, do you think I love driving in traffic? No, I don't, but it's a life skill, right? So I guess, we don't shy away, we don't stay away from, teaching writing, we just, teach it. And now I would like you to look at an approach to teach writing. Now, if you think you have seen this slide before, don't worry, nothing is wrong. This isn't, just a random copy and paste, situation. This isn't, your mind, playing tricks on you. It's just a repetition of the same procedure because it works, okay? And it's safe. And once again, I remember that when I was taught writing as a secondary school student, because I learned I learned English quite late, seriously, when I was 15. Then writing was taught by the principle of let's imitate Polish. So in Polish, we used to write like, 15 pages, for example. And, when you had to write like an essay in English, somebody gave you this fantastic advice. So you have to have a beginning, a development, and an ending. Thank you. Very useful indeed. So once again, I would say that we have to provide like a clear model, regardless of whether it's a story, an essay, an email, a report. Provide a model, provide resources, again, discuss ideas. And I'm going to show you like, a similar cycle that works with writing, okay? So you provide a model. And now a story. I think it's writing a story is especially dangerous when you're Polish, and I think the same thing might be when you're Ukrainian. My experience of Ukraine is like only, I think, a couple of days, but I think that our nations like share this mentality where people like to tell stories. And sometimes when you listen to the older members of your family, sometimes, they tell stories, and these stories like go on and on and on, and sometimes you don't. Well, you're waiting for like this punchline, but there's no punchline. At least these are like some of my family members who do that. And then our students come to class and they think that English writing is the same. That a story might be just 200 words. So what do? I have to write like 100 words or 200 words. I'm just going to write like the first 100 words which come to my mind. And then at the end, at the end of that, when I run out of the word limit, I'll just say, and then I woke up. And that's a story, right? No, because, writing is structured, okay? And even a story has to be structured. So there's some kind of beginning, there's some kind of, like development of the story, and there's an ending to the story. Even if it's like 120 words or 100 words, it has to meet the criteria. So we provide our students with a model again to show them that the way you do it in English is not always the same. That, it's like in this kind of, Slavic mentality, which I love, by the way, but there is no time for that. And I think all the exams will emphasize like the need to conform to certain criteria, all right? And that's why we have to teach our students, to follow certain norms, okay? Then we look at the resources, and once again, our students won't notice the resources unless like we actually show them. Like, these are the resources. Like, of course, when you write a story, you need some kind of, time connecting, right? You need time connectors. So you have to teach the words like, first, then, in the end, etc. And then, you pay attention to to past tenses. And again, this is basic, but two things. First, remember that this is level 1. And second, I think that I have seen a lot of students who are who maybe like B1 or B2 level, and they still say things like, yesterday I go to the cinema, which is like, a very basic like storytelling element, but is the wrong tense, right? So you show your student that, you pay attention to certain things, because, every type of writing follows certain norms, it uses certain expressions, and it will probably use certain grammatical structures more often than others, which is the case with stories and the past simple. Now, sometimes, I think, just sometimes, our students become discouraged with lacking ideas. And I've had that comment from my students, and they told me, again, discouragement, frustration. They told me, I don't know what to write. I wouldn't know what to write even in Polish. So how can I write that story? Do you get this kind of comment, from your students, that, they just lack ideas, even if they have the language? Yeah, so I'm going to show you, just one trick, or two tricks maybe, on how you can generate more ideas, right? And I think the first step is with stories to use questions. You see, you have to write something like 120 word story max, like 100-word story at this level. And then you've got those 6 questions. So you tell your students, now I'd like you to, together we will think about one idea for a story, right? Like, there was a robbery. Or maybe yesterday I was coming back from the trip. So that's the context. And then you think about those 6 question words, and together let's try to write down one question with each of these question words, right? So when did it start? Where did you go? What did you do? Who did you meet? How did you get back? Why did you go on that trip, and so on? And with lower levels, you can actually do it in their mother tongue. You can do it in Ukrainian, and I could do it in Polish, right? Because the point at this stage, the main point is not to teach more English, because very often our students might be not advanced enough to deal with those questions in English. But the point is to generate more ideas, right? And when you have those ideas, it's going to be easier for you to actually start writing, okay? So switching between languages, I don't think it's always a bad idea. I think that actually sometimes, it's a very clever idea, especially when you want to encourage your students. Which, by the way, I've noticed that feedback, at the end of a class, for example, and at the end of a unit, at the end of the school year, I think sometimes feedback may be actually more effective when it's done in Polish, or in Ukrainian, in the native language, right? Because, it's somehow emotionally closer. And with lower levels, you can be sure that they will understand what you're saying, right? So this is an idea that I sometimes, use to generate, the content for that story. That's one of them. And the other one is to use all the senses. And once again, it doesn't have to be It doesn't have to be like all the senses in one story, and it doesn't have to be in English again. So, for example, when you write a story, and let's say that you have moved on from A1 to A2, you know, you can use like a few adjectives. And now imagine in your story, you use a sentence like, I woke up and then I had coffee. That's already successful because, you know, you've got something like woke, correct tense, had coffee, great. But now, wouldn't that be much nicer to say, like, now imagine what happens in your mind when I say, I had that last sip of the cold espresso. Cold espresso, controversial. And when then you say, you know, I had this, so I woke up and there it was waiting for me. So I took a sip of my freshly prepared caramel latte. Cold espresso, caramel latte. Like both of them are like, you know, types of coffee, obviously. But, you know, when you say he reached for the glass, that's fine. But when you say he reached for that hot glass or cold glass, you know, all of that creates like a different idea in the reader's mind. It makes the story, you know, so much easier to read, and also maybe easier to write. Once again, you don't have to pack it like with all the five senses. Like, you know, you think of coffee, so, you know, you think about cold, steaming, toffee flavored, whatever. You don't need that like all the time. But if you drop in just like, you know, one reference, two references, you know, here and there, this is great. Okay. And these like last two ideas show you how you can generate more content. And I think generating content is sometimes more important or just as important as the language resources, all right? And once again, it prevents the frustration. Because many times, I think, especially with writing, you commented on that fact. You said that students were not very eager or very happy to do writing. And, you know, when you're behind with 5 essays, 2 emails, and a story, you don't feel like really good about coming to class again, right? So you feel discouraged and you need, you know, someone to actually help you with that. All right. So we try to outline that with our students, and you see that, you know, when you plan, you've got those question words like where and when, what, how, where, etc. Okay. And then again, I think it's so important with like, you know, this part of the world, you know, that we are in, Poland, you know, the Slavic countries, Ukraine, that we have to keep it organized. Because, you know, when you think about a story, you automatically think about 20 pages. There's no time for 20 pages in the exam, right? There's no space for that. So you have to control that. And you see that, you know, it's something like 2 or 3 paragraphs. So if the whole thing is about 120 words, then each paragraph is probably going to be like, you know, 35 max, like 45 words max, right? And even that has to be organized, because you see, whatever we teach at this level, when we teach like organization is going to like, you know, be so much more beneficial in the future when they have to write longer pieces, when they get to, you know, the like the final exam, you know, in the secondary school before they go to university. But all this organization, all of that begins when you teach students, you know, as young as all clear level 1. Okay. And then summative assessment. Now, obviously, when you produce your final piece, you know, you will expect something like this. So, you know, this is like the classic job of an English teacher. We try and mark, you know, everything. So we have this correction code, grammar, SP, spelling, you know, wrong word, etc. And then, you know, you can see like this comment, you know, excellent, and it's all red. To me, this doesn't look excellent. I don't know how you treat that. Okay. I'm not, you know, quite happy about that. And I think we spend a lot of time, you know, correcting the mistakes. So I'd like to propose an alternative that works online as well. I'm going to show you the same email, which is, you know, kind of marked in a different way. Take a look at that. Can you notice something? So we highlight using a highlighter, or, you know, the highlighter function, you know, in your Microsoft Word or anything else, and you highlight everything that is correct. Isn't that great? Can you see how much of this language is actually correct? I think it's simple. I think it's simple. I think it's beautiful. And now two stories connected with that. One, when I was teaching a group of university professors, 50, 60 years old, you know, these were like people who had achieved everything in their professional life. And there they were. I was like, you know, 35, they were like 50 and over, as I said. And there was this university professor who got her writing back, and I highlighted everything that she had done right in pink. Can you imagine what happened to her, like, you know, when she got that back? Her first impression was that she had made so many mistakes. She said she'd almost had a heart attack. I love bringing a bit of emotion into my class, right? But, you know, in all her life, she never had any kind of writing, you know, any kind of work assessed, you know, that way. So I think it's beautiful. Like, it's great, especially like when you can see your students, you know, facial expressions. Now, a bit of criticism. I remember when I recommended that during a conference, somebody like, you know, put their hand up and said something like, yeah, but, you know, this way they won't see their mistakes and they won't benefit from that. Really? Can't you see the mistakes? Everything that is not highlighted is probably an area for improvement, right? There you go. So you focus on, you know, on those areas that have to be corrected. Make sense? Green, thank you. Thank you for mentioning this. I use green as well. And this is like, you know, somebody asked me to share a funny moment from my teaching. I started using green when I was a high school teacher. And I remember that the headmaster came to observe my class when I was like highlighting everything in green. And she said, you can't use green. And I said, like, why? It's so much less aggressive than, you know, red. And she says, you have to use red because green is the ministry color. Seriously. She told me that if somebody wanted to look at my tests, like be it like the members of some kind of ministry organization or whoever, if they came to our school and they had to like comment on my test, they had the right to use green. I left that school 1 year later and I started working at the university. And you know what? At the university and in the private school of languages where I teach, I can use green. Actually, last semester I used tangerine. Yep. Seeing the benefits of teaching for 25 years, you can finally use your favorite color. Anyway, you know, when you teach online, there's another thing that you can do. Use the benefits of personalization and Google Documents. I think that when you do online teaching, you will mostly work on something like Teams, right? Or maybe something like Google Documents, whatever it is, you know, teaching writing with Google Docs is, you know, so much easier. Now, imagine the following scenario. You teach for the whole school year, you ask your students to bring you the writing. You know, you work on that together, you assess that, all great. How many of your students actually keep a folder with all the writing assignments that they have done during the semester? Have you seen any of them? Like, you know, having a neat folder, arranging, you know, everything in, yeah, photo screens, exactly. And with Google Documents, you know, it all stays there. And it makes the next step so much easier. Because remember that, you know, the next step has to be this feedback, self-reflection, and so on. So when your students like produce a piece of writing, which is in some kind of editable file in Teams or Google Docs, you can always work on that together. And this self-reflection and repetition doesn't have to mean that you have to rewrite, like manually, rewrite the whole piece again. It means that you only have to correct the bits that were highlighted or that were not highlighted. You only have to, and even like copying and pasting the same document, it's so much easier. Now, so this way, you know, it never gets like tossed in the trash, because, you know, this was the reality. Like when you do like, you know, paper marking, very often our students just look at the grade, throw it away. Of course, if they're more polite, they wait until you're gone, and then they will throw it away, right? But when you use like one file where you just separate every assignment, you have like this beautiful history, like a whole beautiful history of someone's progress. And if you teach the same class for a year, for 2 years, you can use the same file with the same student. And you see, anytime they become discouraged, you can always go back and tell them, like, look, this is your writing from September. This is your writing from October the previous year, right? And everyone's file is safe. I work on this principle that only the student herself or himself and me have access to the file, right? So this way, you can all, you can both see everything. And I think it's amazing. One more thing is whenever you have a chance, try to personalize writing and show your students that, you care about the content of what they write. So those 2 examples here are actually the examples from my classes. They were B2 level. And the first assignment was recommending a new sport to some kind of classmate, but I changed that assignment to recommending a new sport to me. Because, this way it becomes more personal, and I show my students that I care about what they say, not only about how they say it or how they express their ideas. When we did reviews of different films and TV series and albums, I told them, can you please write a review of something that I haven't seen, of something I haven't yet heard? This way I can benefit, from this relationship, and I can, discover something new, which is the whole point. I hope it makes sense, right? So with writing, we pretty much go through the same cycle, but it's going to be made so much easier because of, the digital possibilities, right? And as promised, the bonus section. Now, our students tend to become discouraged. As I said, this will happen a lot, right? But the ultimate goal of all our teaching, is to help them develop a growth mindset. A growth mindset is this attitude that you can, as opposed to this fixed mindset of I am who I am and I will never change and I will always be a failure. A growth mindset is about believing that you can improve. Okay, so a lot of people, according to Carol Dweck, a lot of people who are praised for their successes and grades and as children, these people very often develop a fixed mindset. And you know what happens when you have a fixed genius mindset and then you experience a failure? Then the genius mentality is shattered. I was that kind of kid when I was 7. I was praised for my grades. Then things became difficult around grade 6, and I was a total loser for the rest of my primary school and my high school. I only got back to life in college, right? Because, I was praised for my grades. But when you apply formative assessment strategies, when you work with your students and you show them that they can change, I think you kind of prepare them for life. And they go back, just like we go back. I think about my brother, you think about your grannies, you think about your mom, think about, your dance teacher, and you think about, yeah, that person showed me to persevere, told me to persevere, told me how to do that. And, it helped me, develop a different mindset. And this last feature of All Clear, which I would like you to pay attention to, and please pay attention to it, because it's just as important as the previous two, if not more important, is going through together with your students, going through what they have already learned and what they still have to learn. I did that with my, Polish group this holiday. After every unit, we sat together and, we talked about, so do you know the names of those places in town? Do you know the adjectives? And, we spent 15 minutes, but if something is worth doing, this is worth doing. And I think that because it's at the end of a unit, it's sometimes neglected because, there's always more grammar to do. There's always more vocabulary to do. That, there will always be a time for more grammar. There will always be a time for, more vocabulary, more worksheets and all that. It's all important, but nothing, really nothing is as important as, showing students that they're between like there, like the final goal, and not yet. This review might be either oral, or you may do it like on a scale from 1 to 5. So, you ask your students to rate like from 1 to 5. So if you know all the places in town, it's a 5. If you don't know all of them, it's like a 1 or 2 or 3, right? So the way you do it, you may do it like orally, you may do it in writing from time to time, but the most important thing is you have to do it, right? It's a fantastic feature of this course book, and I think it would be a waste not to take advantage of this, all right? Because we all need to know what we have already learned and what we still have to learn. As a little takeaway, if you still, haven't seen, I think it's like a 10 or 12-minute talk from Carol Dweck on TED. Please watch that, straight after today's conference, and try and, read more about the subject. This was only like the beginning, I would say. So remember, I started like with this quote about motivation. Motivation and success are connected with the love of learning, love of challenge, and these are like the greatest gifts that we can give our students, all right? Remember my brother? He's still the same guy. It's like 40 years later, and the picture here is like, him teaching some kind of family relative, a younger girl, how to take photographs with a camera that's different than just a mobile phone. So, some great teachers, are always like, with us. Somebody wants me to go back to the previous slide with the TED Talk. Carol Dweck, The Power of Believing You Can Improve. I think you will be able to download like a video from this presentation later, okay? So I hope you enjoy that. I hope, it's like all clear to you now. And if you would like to leave me some feedback, tomorrow, my best friend, Jacek, will be talking to you about, speaking and formative assessment. And if you could leave us some feedback, I have posted, a photograph showing like me getting ready for this conference with you guys. So, if you would like to leave some words there, I would be so grateful, okay? So thank you very much for this opportunity. It was great speaking to you, and thank you very much for all the interactions, and thank you for reacting to my jokes. Nothing is as precious as that. Thank you.
Czeslaw, thank you very much. I was watching and even taking notes to get the ideas you shared. And I do believe that our participants also got some very practical ideas from your talk and have more or less clear picture of how to formatively assess speaking and writing. Thank you very much, and hope to see you during our next events for Ukrainian teachers. Again, thank you very much for your ideas.
Thank you.